Let's give some metaphysical background. Okay, so and I'll give the Hindu theistic version as opposed to the Buddhists have a very similar version, but without the personal element that I'll mention in Hinduism. So in the Hindu version, God's creativity is multi-leveled. Or another way of saying the same thing is that this is not the only world that God creates. I think that would be also in Christianity. And so there's a psychological system in Tantra, a sort of a cult psychological system that says every human being has potentially a formation in 7 worlds, sometimes 9 worlds or 10 worlds. But it's become standard sort of over time to settle on 7. And in the body, the center of individuality that connects with these worlds are called chakras, wheels. And they're supposed to, the 7 are, the top one is supposed to be actually above the head, about 3 inches above what's called the Brahmarandra, split in the skull. And that's called the Sahasrara. And then there's the third eye center, the Ajna chakra, and then the throat center, heart center, one at the navel, right above the genitals, and then one at the base of the spine. So these are not physical centers, right? These are supposed to be centers that we live in simultaneously with our physical body. But, I mean, I guess we in our everyday consciousness are aware of not just our bodies, but our breath and emotions and desires, and of course, thought. And these are sort of energies, thought, emotions, and desires correspond supposedly to these various worlds and to our various centers of consciousness. Now, there's a channel, supposedly, in this occult body that connects these centers. That's called the Sushumna, or the divine road, the central channel, sometimes it's called. There are lots of channels. There's also the channels for pranic energy, or breath, a kind of occult breath that connects the chakras in a different way. But the central channel just goes straight up and down. Sometimes it's said to correspond in Christian iconography to the tree of life, which has 7 branches. In any case, the divine center, the highest center, the Sahasrara, or Sahasradela, 1,000-petaled lotus above the head, is supposed to be a center where there's Shakti, another kind of energy, like the Holy Spirit, and it can flow in this central channel, but people are ordinarily not aware of that flow. There's also supposed to be in the lowest center, the Muladhara at the base of the spine, corresponding to the base of spine, an energy called Kundalini, which is also Shakti, but it's supposed to be, and I don't quite understand this. I've not had myself a Kundalini experience, but the way I understand this is that it's supposed to be Shakti like the Shakti in the Sahasrara, except somehow asleep. It's a very powerful force asleep in the lowest chakric center, and sometimes it's put in the second one, the one above the genitals. There's not absolute uniformity and agreement about this. So there are 2 kinds of tantric practices that focus on the Sushumna and the flow of Shakti in the central channel that unites all the chakric centers. One is a very bhakti or devotional kind of practice that sort of implores the divine, usually figured as female Shakti, the mother, to descend in grace, to shower down, rain down on the being from through the bindu in the back of the head. And then another kind of practice focuses on awakening the Kundalini in the lowest most center, and that it rises up in the iconography. You'll see the mystic cobra hood spread over Shiva's head. That's supposed to be the symbol of this energy, sometimes said to be a kind of evolutionary energy, or the divine in matter that's awakened and then and shoots up through this central channel and comes into the highest center, awakening all the intermediate centers. Now, what I've read, there's some accounts of people who've had Kundalini experiences. The most articulate, very well written one is one by Gopi Krishna. And there's some other ones. There's a guy in the Theosophical Society in the 19th century named Charles Ledbetter, who wrote a book on the chakras, comparing it to Christian mysticism and sort of world mysticism. In any case, from what I've read, the practices of awakening Kundalini are quite vigorous and also somewhat dangerous, in that there's this danger of, without the presence of a guru, of the Kundalini, when it's awakening, not to rise all the way up, to get, to shoot out one of the chakric centers or something. And that can, cause the surface consciousness, our everyday consciousness, to be, look like a person's insane. There's also an account by the great contemporary yogi, Swami Satyananda Saraswati, who died last year in 90-something. And he said he had a Kundalini experience when he was a child, and his parents were going to put him in an Indian insane asylum. And so fortunately they took him first to the Shivananda ashram, and he eventually became, one of Shivananda's leading disciples, and started the Bihar School of Yoga, and became, a great saint in his own right. But his family thought that this little 12-year-old kid had gone crazy. The stories about the dangers of awakening of Kundalini are there. I mean, they're not just in Christian literature, they're in yogic traditions as well. But I'm sorry that was such a long-winded answer, but Kundalini, it's really, you have to sort of understand it in this sort of larger context of the occult tantric psychology.
That's great.